Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker and Honourable Senators, I rise in the Senate today to speak to Bill C-29, an act to provide for establishment of a National Council for Reconciliation. I acknowledge that we meet here today on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. The Government of Canada website states, reconciliation frames the Crown's actions in relation to Aboriginal and treaty rights and informs the Crown's broader relationship with Indigenous peoples. The Government of Canada's approach to reconciliation is guided by the UN Declaration, the TRC calls to action, constitutional values, and collaboration with Indigenous peoples, as well as provincial and territorial governments. Please keep this in mind throughout my speech and give it the credence and validity it should be afforded as it applies to Bill C-29. According to the Honourable Murray Sinclair, I quote, "The road we travel is equal in importance to the destination we seek. There are no shortcuts. When it comes to truth and reconciliation, we are forced to go the distance." End quote. Given this context, examining the road to Bill C-29 and its destination is essential. On September the 21st of 2022, the Honourable Mark Miller, Minister of Crown, Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs, or CERNA, stated in his second reading speech, "I would like to take some time to reflect on the genesis of this legislation. The road to get here required collaboration and a lot of work. Bill C-29 has been in the making for many years." So how did we get here? On December the 14th of 2017, then Minister of CERNA, Carolyn Bennett, announced the appointment of 6 members to the interim board of directors for the National Council for Reconciliation and noted, "Over the next 6 months, the board members will engage with various stakeholders to recommend options for the establishment of the National Council for Reconciliation and the endowment of a National Reconciliation Trust." On April the 11th of 2018, an engagement event was held in Ottawa with 23 participants and 6 interim board members, which resulted in a 9-page summary of the event. On June 12th of 2018, a final report was presented to CERNA, including a recommendation for establishing a transitional committee for the Council. 3 years later, on January 18th of 2021, the Honourable Mark Miller announced the establishment of a 5-member Indigenous-led transitional committee who will engage with various groups, as well as provinces and territories, on the legislative framework for the National Council for Reconciliation and will provide advice and recommendations to the Minister. On June 22nd of 2022, Bill C-29 was introduced into the House of Commons. On October 6, 2022, before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Indigenous and Northern Affairs, Minister Miller stated, and I quote, "The Transitional Committee, recognizing the urgency felt by many residential school survivors and their families, and recognizing the engagement by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the interim board, took a targeted approach to engagement." In March of 2022, they hosted an event with Indigenous and non-Indigenous technical experts to discuss key considerations that could be included in the legislation, such as information sharing. End quote. I had requested and searched for information on the meetings and consultations after June of 2018. At 10 a.m. this morning, my office received a copy of correspondence to Minister Miller from the Transitional Committee for the National Council for Reconciliation dated March 15th of 2022. The correspondence states, and I quote, and I ask that you please take note, "Our recommendations are based on our own in-depth discussions as a committee, a targeted engagement session with technical experts, and the interim board's final report released in 2018. End quote. I can confirm that those technical experts amount to 9 individuals with legal, financial, or data expertise. This number means 32 people, 32, were specifically targeted to engage with Bill C-29 between 2018 and 2022. Bear in mind, 9 of these were technical experts. Contrast this with the fact that there are 1.8 million Indigenous peoples in Canada and over 630 First Nation bands. There is no record of meaningful consultations with Inuit, First Nations, or Métis, or engagement with various groups or provinces and territories on the National Council for Reconciliation legislative framework. This assertion would appear to be corroborated by CBC News in an article dated February 6th of 2023, which reported, and I quote, "The Canadian government says it's unable to list the Indigenous communities that participated in the drafting of the proposed National Council for Reconciliation Act because no such list exists," end quote. The article further quotes MP Jamie Battiste that broader engagement with Indigenous communities and organizations is on the horizon should legislation pass. Collectively, this is highly disconcerting and troubling. Bill C-29 is now before Senate after passing the third reading in the House of Commons despite the absence of recorded consultation or engagement with First Nation, Inuit, and Métis, specifically over 4 years between April 2018 and the introduction of the bill in the House of Commons in June of 2022. Bill C-29 is a matter of interest arising from the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. This information should be a matter of public record. In a news article dated October 17th of 2022, Assembly of First Nations National Chief Roseanne Archibald expressed concern regarding Bill C-29 and the fact that CERNA is responsible for appointing the majority of directors of the board of the National Council for Reconciliation. She noted, quote, "This is not within the spirit and intent of reconciliation, and it's very paternalistic," end quote. On December 1st of 2022, Inuit Tapiriit Kanatami, or ITK, withdrew its support for Bill C-29, noting that passing this bill could undermine the nation-to-nation building between the Inuit and the federal government. President Nathan Obed said, quote, "We believe this could be detrimental," end quote. In my discussions with ITK, it became clear that Bill C-29 was not co-developed, nor was there meaningful consultation. The Inuit were neither a part of the drafting nor privy to the bill before it was introduced into the House of Commons. This refrain was repeated in my meetings with the Inuit Regional Corporation, Huichin Tribal Council, and Métis Nation Saskatchewan, as well as with Grand Chief Jackson Lafferty, Betchako Chief Clifford Daniels, Gamete Chief Doreen Arrowmaker, and Wati Chief Alphonse Ntsiza, all from the Klitcho Nation. Not only were none of them a part of the consultation or drafting of Bill C-29, aside from the Inuit, not one of the Indigenous organizations were cognizant of the fact that this bill had been introduced and passed third reading in the House of Commons and was currently in the Senate of Canada. Grand Chief Kikovichik stated, quote, "While the GTC supports the overall objective of establishing a National Council for Reconciliation and understands the importance of doing so in a timely manner, it must be done in a way that is thoughtful, strategic, and inclusive. The government should not see this as an opportunity to simply check off a box on its commitment to fulfill the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action and rush this important piece of legislation." According to Glenn McCollum, President of Métis Nation Saskatchewan, quote, "When Canada purports to create a body that speaks for the Métis and that body is not accountable to and selected by our decision-making processes, it ultimately renders it illegitimate and undermines our position as a government of Métis in Saskatchewan," end quote. Given the role of Inuit, First Nations, and Métis, it is essential to note that Canada has 25 modern treaties, 4 standalone government agreements, 2 sectoral education agreements, 1 governance agreement in partnership with Indigenous, provincial, and territorial governments across 6 provinces and all 3 territories, covering over 40% of Canada's landmass. The issue of modern treaty is partially where the Inuit concerns reside, with Bill C-29 and those of other right holders within Canada. The Inuit have 4 land claim agreements: the Inuit Settlement Region, Nunavut, Nunavik, and Nunatsiavut. In 2017, the Inuit engaged in an Inuit Crown Partnership Committee, or ICPC, with the Government of Canada. The Inuit Nunangat policy recognizes Inuit Nunangat, or the Inuit homeland, as a distinct geographic, cultural, and political region. A key component of ICPC is to advance reconciliation, strengthen the Inuit-Crown partnership, and create a more prosperous Inuit Nunangat through meaningful collaboration. That being said, the Inuit, through 4 distinct land time agreements and collectively through the ICP partnership with Canada since 2017, have constitutionally protected rights and obligations and existing contracts with the federal Crown. The Government of Canada has 12 Statement of Principles on the federal approach to modern treaty implementations. While all 12 are integral, I will focus on 2 that highlight the importance of meaningful engagement and consultation, specifically regarding Bill C-29. Number 2, modern treaties are reconciliation in action. The Supreme Court of Canada wrote that treaties serve to reconcile the prior occupation of North America by Aboriginal peoples with the assertion of Crown sovereignty. Treaty rights are recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. Treaties establish a mutually agreed on and enduring framework for reconciliation and ongoing relationships between the Crown and Aboriginal peoples. Reconciliation frames the Crown's actions in relation to Section 35 rights and informs the Crown's broader relationship with Aboriginal peoples. Canada's approach to reconciliation is informed by legal principles articulated by the courts and by negotiation and dialogue with Aboriginal peoples and provincial and territorial governments. Number 10, all federal departments and agencies will conduct their businesses in a manner that is consistent with Canada's modern treaty obligations. Federal departments and agencies will carry out all functions in line with their mandates, including the development and delivery of programs, services, policy, and legislation, in a manner consistent with modern treaty obligations and evolving framework. The preamble in Bill C-29 states, I quote, "Whereas the Government of Canada is committed to achieving reconciliation with Indigenous peoples through renewed nation-to-nation, government-to-government, and Inuit-Crown relationships based on the recognition of rights, respect, cooperation, and partnership." End quote. Yet, Bill C-29 is silent on its role and potential impacts on historic and modern treaties in Canada, despite these rights being recognized and affirmed by Section 35 of the Constitution Act, despite royal assent of the United Nations Declarations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, despite Canada's assertion that reconciliation frames the Crown's actions concerning Aboriginal and treaty rights, and their approach to reconciliation is guided by UNDRIP. The TRC calls to action, constitutional values, and collaboration with Indigenous peoples. According to TRC calls to action number 53, I quote, "We call upon the Parliament of Canada, in consultation and collaboration with Aboriginal peoples, to enact legislation to establish a National Council for Reconciliation." Instead, Bill C-29 was not as a result of consultation and collaboration with Aboriginal peoples. Rather, it is the outcome of 32 targeted individuals and an expedited approach by the Transitional Committee for the National Council for Reconciliation and the Government of Canada. I have spent much time exploring, understanding, discussing, and researching Bill C-29, its genesis, and the road it has taken. As an Inuk senator with a strong understanding of Inuit history and the history of legislation that has had and continues to affect not just Inuit, but all Indigenous peoples in Canada, Bill C-29 is vexatious. My concern lies with the fundamental principles or foundational principles that led to the formation of Bill C-29 and the deliberate absence of meaningful consultation with Inuit, First Nations, and Métis, and engagement with provinces and territories. It is negligent that a bill on reconciliation endorsed by Canada blatantly disregards the fundamental principles in the development of legislation which affects us as Indigenous peoples sits before the Senate. This should concern all of us. As parliamentarians, it is our duty to examine, question, and use sober second thought to ensure that when we are considering a bill that not only arises from TRC calls to action, but impacts Indigenous peoples, we are not repeating the historical wrongs of Canada in the guise of reconciliation. I urge you all to revisit Bill C-29. while I support reconciliation and the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, I do not support Bill C-29. Koyinaini, Masitro, thank you.
Honourable Senators, we are out of time. However, Senator Anderson, I have 3 senators that seems to have questions for you. Are you asking for 5 more minutes?
Sure.
Colleagues, are you in agreement? Yes. I have Senator Lankin, Senator Tanis, and Senator Moncion. Senator Lankin.
Thank you very much,
ma'am. We have 5 minutes.
Why is it always me you warn? My reputation precedes me.
Luck of the draw.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Anderson. I had the opportunity this week, along with a number of my colleagues in our group, to meet with a member of the Transitional Council, Mike DeGagne, and also with representatives of the Métis National Council, and we have further meetings coming up. One of the things that Mike DeGagne, who is First Nations, talked about is the representation on the work going forward up to ITK, Métis National Council, and First Nations, and the importance of them having a role in designing the consultation. He also talked about this as a bill to enable the building of the house, but the view of the house, the structure of the house, the foundation of the house must be informed by meaningful, deep consultation with the community, and this is the framework approach. Now, sometimes that's really difficult for us, a framework approach, and we're seeing it on other bills, because the consultation is to come, and the commitment of the consultation is there.
Question.
Do you make any distinction between this being as establishing that we're going to build the house, but the consultation will follow? Does that give you any comfort at all?
Senator Anderson.
When the ministers of CERNA, then Minister Carolyn Bennett and currently Minister Miller spoke and appointed the board, they were very clear that they were going to consult. Both were very clear that consultations were going to happen with the Indigenous groups and with provinces and territories. In my opinion, this bill has no foundation. The foundation of a bill does not come after it passes legislation. That time has passed. I also want to point out that the preamble of the bill, which reasserts all the values of meaningful consultation, UNDRIP, are in the preamble. They're not in the bill. They're not legally binding. That should be concerning. An example clear in that is Indigenous languages, the importance and value of Indigenous languages. Yet in the bill, the 2 languages are French and English.
Senator Tanis.
Thank you. We've of course run into this before. It seems incredibly ironic that we run into it on this particular bill. I'm wondering, Senator Anderson, whether you think we should be voting to defeat this bill, or whether you think we should refer it, pass it through to committee, and have the committee, suggest to the committee, or have the committee consider what happened with S3, where we called the government back in and said, go do the consultation and come back. We'll hold on to this bill till it's done properly. Would that be a solution, or would you prefer that we just defeated it right now and go back to the drawing board?
Senator Anderson.
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask, because I have my own opinion where this bill should be. Politely, you won't say what that is. But I believe that others should look at this bill again. In light of the information that I was able to find, the information that I was not able to find, and there was a lot of not able to find, and the fact that I just received a piece of it this morning at 10 o'clock is concerning, given that that information is what was supposed to have informed the development of this bill and the introduction of this bill in June of 2022 in the House.
Sénatrice Moncion, une courte question. Sénateur Brazo.
C'était très court. Can this bill be fixed?
Senator Anderson.
Based on my research, the only way to fix this bill is to go back to the beginning. That somehow the people that were intended to inform this bill were not part and parcel of this bill. They were engaged after the fact. There was no meaningful consultation. I fail to understand as an Indigenous person on an Indigenous bill on reconciliation how it fails to meet that.